Hey everybody, welcome into Lettermen Row headquarters. I'm Austin Ward. This is the very first edition of the Tim May podcast. Unnamed Tim May Show, Tim May Project. I don't know what you're going to call it.
Host Austin Ward. I like that idea.
I'm not hosting it, but for today, since it's the first time, I thought we should at least give an introduction to a man who doesn't need any introduction. The man has covered Ohio State football for 38, 40.
Let's just say almost 4 decades.
He's the gold standard. Somebody that since I got here, I've been fortunate enough to get to know well and try to do my best to compete against him. And for now, it looks like I don't have to. We might be on the same page here, same team for a little while with Lettermen Row. Bringing him out of semi-retirement to host this podcast, write a little bit for us. And Tim, I'm glad you chose us. Thanks for hanging out, and I'm ready to see what you can bring for your podcast here.
Yeah, I am too, actually. But thanks for the invitation, Austin. I've been kind of like in limbo here since I retired from the Dispatch, and obviously those were some long, great years and stuff. And I was just looking for something to kind of, more than anything else, pay my Medicare bill. So, but anyway, past that, I'm never at a loss of words when it comes to talking about college football, and I've always enjoyed it. And this is a way for me to kind of stay in there and keep my hand in there a little bit. But I won't be stepping on your toes too much.
You can
especially
do that
when you got sneakers on.
Well, we might have to come up with a new title for me. I'm considered the senior writer at Lettermen Row. I don't think that works if you're going to be on the masthead.
Let's leave you with that thing. I'll just be a emeritus.
Okay.
I like the emeritus thing.
Well, since you retired, everybody did kind of wonder if you were going to hang back around, and we saw you throughout spring ball finding it's like you couldn't quite let go.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it because I'll be flat honest with people. There are moments when I really, really enjoy retirement.
Yeah.
And Will Crawl, the establisher of this website, has allowed me to come on and do a few things, but not necessarily be on what you'd call a full-time basis.
Right.
But when I start talking, sometimes it seems like more than full-time. It seems like overtime. I understand that, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to kind of keeping my finger in the pot, so to speak. I still plan on traveling around the country a few times this fall and seeing some games around the country that other places that I haven't been allowed to do for the last almost more than 35 years. And one of those games will be Alabama at Texas A&M, which happens to be on Ohio State's first off week. Go figure.
Great timing.
Yeah.
It's like they made it for you.
But I'll get to see my brothers down there, their families, my mom who lives in Lufkin, Texas, and take in a football game. And my buddy Jeff Snook, who as long ago was a sports writer, but he and I've got a few other trips planned to see a few key games. Some of them Army-Navy happens after the Ohio State season. But there are a few plans out there.
When was the last time you went to a college football game and sat in the stands?
Oh, man. I don't remember. I haven't done that, and I don't remember the last time I did that.
Yeah, we rarely get opportunities like that.
Yeah, I've been a sports writer since I was 19, and I don't think I've been to a game for fun except for a couple of I'll go to high school games every now and then. There's a high school right around the corner from me, Bradley High School, Hilliard Bradley, and I'll go to games like that. I've been to a few Lufkin games back over the years, but maybe a handful over the last 40 years. But no, I don't. I'll be honest with you, I prefer sitting and watching them on television because you know why? You can have 4 on at once.
Yeah. You got the bathroom nearby.
Yes.
A lot of more food options than they have in
small
the horseshoe
fridge
press
nearby.
Box. Yep.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to jump in with these questions. This is your show.
No. That's fine with me. I do better when I'm prompted than I do maybe on my own. But bottom line is, what we want to bring here is, maybe bring a few guests on every now and then. But in essence, talk about college football and especially Ohio State football and the way it fits into the big picture and even the small picture. This is interesting a year. The reason I kind of wanted to keep my, like I said, my finger in the pie a little bit is this is as interesting a year as I can remember, with a new quarterback, a new offensive line, and by the way, a new head coach.
New head coach, yeah.
And
last but not least.
Well, he's not a brand new head coach. He was a head coach for 3 games last year.
Undefeated head coach.
Ryan Day. But I am really intrigued with Ryan Day and the little bit we've gotten to know him. how intelligent he is. Number one, different character than Urban Meyer was, but you get the sense that behind the scenes he's still a taskmaster, and a guy that's going to be demanding, and he knows, this is kind of like your first job as a CEO, and it's of well, IBM used to be the thing. It's of Google, or Apple. And where do you go from here? Well, what you want to do is you want to hang on to this kind of job. And so I'm interested to see how Ryan Day turns it into the Ryan Day program as opposed to inheriting the Urban Meyer program.
Yeah, you touched on this, how intelligent he's been, how well he's handled the situation. He's got those 3 games where he had to go out in front. That was a pretty adverse situation, had to do the press conferences and all that stuff. But this is the full-time deal now, and it's like, I'm not going to try to make more out of going to Chicago for media days than it is, but he's going to be the focus of attention, I think, for all the national people that come in to Big Ten Media Days. Tim and I and Spencer Holbrook behind the camera over there will all be there covering that for Lettermen Row this week. But, it'll be interesting, I think, to see the kind of questions he gets, how he handles it, what the answers are. He's going to have a new quarterback, new offensive line. Some of the X's and O's are pretty obvious what he'll have to say, but you always get stuff out of left field, right? You show up at these events, and it's not Super Bowl media day, but you can hear some off-the-wall stuff. So I was thinking this first one for him, how curious you might be, to go to another one of these media days and some of the crazy stuff that you've seen in Chicago over the years.
Well, the interesting thing about him, a lot of times the first-time head coaches there have always had sort of almost like a prepared script that they go by when they come in and have the big session in front of the media before they have the breakdown, which, with Urban Meyer, it was like the whole room moved from, and Jim Harbaugh, the whole room moved from the big room to wherever they were. Yeah. So instead of it being sort of a controlled atmosphere, it was a Donnybrook, with Jerry Emig trying to point out who asked the next question, but that's not the way it always works. But the bottom line is that a lot of these first-time guys, they want to make a good impression. They don't want to embarrass themselves. They don't want to say something stupid, right on down the line, all the new guys. But speaking of like a guy showing up for his first Big Ten media days, I'll never forget when Lou Tepper showed up for Illinois, and the first things out of his mouth is, the biggest play in football is the punt.
Oh, yeah.
And I started laughing. I couldn't help myself, because anybody knows me knows I believe that the biggest play in football is any touchdown.
Yeah, those are pretty significant.
Because it changes the game either for you or for your opponent based on things. But
it's a really revolutionary thought there, Tim.
Yeah, biggest play in football is the punt. Well, who had that as their mantra about 4 or 5 years later when he became the head coach at The Ohio State University was a guy named Jim Tressel. And he actually uttered that. And I just went, well, watch out. But I didn't change my mind about it. And he and I had discussions about it. One day he pulls me into his office at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center and reaches up on his shelf. And he had books everywhere, just like Urban did, and pulls out a book, John W. Wiltz, and it was I forgot the name of, something about football, and there was a chapter in there, the most important play in football is the punt, and he had me read it, and I just went, okay, I guess this goes way back, but that was when football was more like soccer,
right?
I mean, the biggest play in Australian rules football is the punt.
That's correct.
So I can't argue that.
Can change a game that way.
Yeah.
But it did work out a little bit better for Tress than it did for Lou Tepper. So
yeah, it definitely did. I mean, Lou Tepper was great defensive mind, but a little bit out of his bailiwick when it came to being a head coach. Because the bottom thing about head coaching, what you're seeing about Ryan Day right now, you can be the greatest genius, Charlie Weiss. Just ask him, right?
Yeah.
You got to bring in the players, man. That's what makes a difference, and that's what's been interesting over the last several months to watch Ohio State shift from the Urban Meyer recruiting to the Ryan Day. I'm talking about Ryan Day now being in charge, and how it went like that. It's kind of like watching. I watch CNBC every day because I like to dabble. Who doesn't? And you'll have these things, there'll be a dip, and you'll have these experts on telling you how the dip's going to go into a recession, and ding dong, better cut back the interest rates, or we're all in trouble. The next day, you'll have a meteoric, or not meteoric because meteors come down. You'll have a rocket rise, and you'll have the experts on about how this could continue,
forever.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it was. It was kind of a little bit of a dip, but I think anybody can see that they're getting the job done recruiting-wise, especially at wide receiver.
Last 2-3 weeks have been outrageous for Ohio State. Been outrageous for Brian Hartline. It's like last summer we were having this conversation at Big Ten Media Days, right? Like it was you and I had and everybody that covers Ohio State, an interesting trip to Chicago last year.
Yes.
And the discussion there then was because it became clear that Brian Hartline was going to be the guy. Even if Urban denied that when I asked him he denied a lot of things that day, but that was one of them. Is Brian Hartline going to be the next guy?
Well, Corey Dennis was there, and Corey Dennis is Urban's grandson, Urban's son-in-law.
Yeah.
So there was that. And Corey Dennis, I think, is a talented
He's a very
young
good
man.
Yep.
But you're right. But I mean, the way that week started, with the Brett McMurphy story, and then when things went south big time. I mean, obviously. Things that happened with Zach Smith that had caused Urban to fire him, basically almost at the same time. Now, whether one brought on the other, I'm sure people think one thing, but we all know the reasons given were basically Urban had not been kept abreast of what was going on in Zach Smith's personal life.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it went from and that's the way it's been a lot of times with Ohio State at these media days. I mean, you go in expecting 2 days of just shooting the bull,
hoping to get enough content to last till camp starts.
And then you end up not getting some of the stuff you wanted because you have to follow up on these other things. I'm sitting there. What was Joey Bosa's senior year or last year was 2015. And Todd Jones, from the Dispatch, he was up there also. He was our third guy up there, and Bill Rabinowitz. But I came into the room about 2 hours or hour and a half before the thing was to start, and I said, I'm fixing to file something. I said, keep your ears open, see how this room changes. And I filed the story that I had learned that Joey Bosa and Jalen Marshall and a couple other guys were going to be suspended for that opening game. And all of a sudden, the room kind of went quiet, and somebody goes, "Did you see this?" It was like one of those kind of things. It was
a silent bomb had gone off.
I'm not going to say it was funny, but it was funny how things can change, can spin on a dime.
And that's happened now a couple times for Ohio State because you go into it, and I've talked about this with people before, like, football season's here. You're excited to go to Chicago. I'm like, I'm kind of dreading it because one of two things happen. Either it's a really boring 2 days and nobody says anything, or the best player in America gets suspended. Carlos Hyde and Bradley Roby have suspensions handed down.
July, man. If Ohio State could get through July.
Braxton Miller is moving to wide receiver.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that you can't really prepare for, and it pops up because, we go through this period, the couple weeks before media days, the coaches are on vacation. So you're not going to find out a lot of information. We're not bothering them while they're in New Hampshire or wherever else they might go, Florida.
Yeah.
And we all, believe it or not, try to take vacations too. So, you have this quiet period, and then all of a sudden you might just hit this avalanche of information just piled on top of you in 2 days. And then you hope to catch your breath in Chicago and then come back and still have another week and a half to go before a training camp starts.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember there was one preseason or one media days where I broke the story that I think Ohio State had four incoming freshmen were going to be ineligible for because of the clearinghouse stuff. This was back when they were the NCAA was becoming
they're flexing their muscles,
more serious about academics and stuff. And I can't remember when that was. It was like 1990 or 89 or something like that. And we're sitting, and I spent my whole night calling all these guys and getting, you plan on having at least one good meal when you're in Chicago, and you're getting pizza across the street, before the place closes at 11.
Right.
And that's the way.
It's not the deep dish either.
Yeah, covering Ohio State's always been an adventure, man. It's always been. You can always count on something interesting happening interesting in quotes happening sometime during the season, during the build up to the season. It's rarely in the spring.
Now, have they always?
Of course, it happened in the spring or in the fall, I mean, the winter this year.
Yeah.
I think when you lose two quarterbacks, and then you have two come in or three come in really, who weren't there. When you've got a room full of quarterbacks you didn't even recruit to begin with. I mean, that's a pretty big happening.
I don't think I've seen anything quite like the last 13 months.
Well, take Joe Burrow. Yeah. When Joe Burrow left a year and a half.
I count that too because he could still be – he could have been the starting quarterback for Ohio State this year.
All you got to do is wait, and you get to start it. Quarterback at Ohio State.
And nobody wants to do that. I really thought that Matthew Baldwin would. You and I have had this conversation many times before, and that I think is the one that I never believed that Tate Martell was going to be a starting quarterback for Ohio State. Did not believe in his skills as a passer mainly, but there were other things that I questioned about the maturity, even when people were saying that it had improved and he had a better feel for it.
I really liked him as an athlete, though. I'm telling you, he's special in a lot of ways. But you're right. The more you watched him, it wasn't so much what you're thinking, but you kind of think the way coaches think. They're not really recruiting a guy like him. If you go with a guy like him, what's your offense going to be like compared to what this guy's going to run when he goes in there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you, but go ahead.
But so to me, the tipping point was really Baldwin, and obviously that's the last one. And that forced them to really go in and find something when the market was not huge. Gunnar Hoke, they did as well as they possibly could have done in that situation, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously you're going to take the risk to get Justin Fields no matter what happens. If you're going to make a trade, think about it like the NBA to get a superstar or the potential for one. And it's
what you have to do.
And if you're going to trade Tate Martell and a future first-round pick or future considerations and Matthew Baldwin, I don't know that you think twice because you also it wasn't an actual trade. They still thought they would have Baldwin because he would be 2 years down the road.
Yeah,
and that's the one that's really kind of cleaned it out where you're looking not just at this year, but you can feel pretty good I think with Fields and Hoke. But then you just have Jack Miller looming there as potentially the only one after the 2020 season. That's where you're starting to think, well, the future looks a little murky, and then you're going to have to keep digging back in to that transfer portal maybe to find a solution.
That's the new way of doing things, man. I mean, it's crazy. It's the free agent, it's free agent market, and it's crazy. I mean, I don't even really know. You literally have to play year to year now. It's almost like it's worse than NBA or stuff, or the NFL because those guys may be gone next year. I mean, that's what they're dealing with. And I'm just interested. I was very interested in Ohio State going after Justin Fields as aggressively as they did. But like you said, this is a guy that really didn't give them much consideration the first time around.
Right.
And yet he's there. He was a 5-star talent. You saw him in the camps, etc. And he could take you to – I'm not going to say another level, a higher level than Dwayne Haskins Jr. because Justin Fields is not the same kind of quarterback. Mm-hmm. He may argue with that. But
I think he would.
We just saw a great passer come and go at Ohio State. I mean, one of the great passers statistically the greatest single-year passer in Big Ten history, and much less Ohio State history.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that with this guy. But you're going to have a dynamic quarterback, and you can't pass on that. I mean, he's interested in you. You're interested in him. But now where do you go? Now you've worked yourself into, like I said, you've got a room there with nobody there who you recruited. Mm-hmm. I mean, Gunnar Hoke was given short shrift by Ohio State back in the day. His dad, Frank Hoke, was a tight end there that, I've known Gunnar Hoke since he was about 13 or 14 or 15. His dad introduced me to him at one of the, some of those summer camps and stuff. And, it's really funny how a legacy guy could be your backup quarterback. Chugunov, was at West Virginia. I think he's a decent quarterback. You may disagree with me, but I think he's a guy to keep your eye on to a certain extent. But it's just, wow, the way that room changed like that, it's crazy.
Yeah, Chugunov.
And that's the most important position in football. I just said something profound there.
That's more of that innovative thinking that's going on. Touchdowns and quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So we're going to learn a lot on this show. Yeah, you make a great point about Chugunov. I tend to dismiss him. When I look at the depth chart, and boy, if you get down past 2, what happens? I mean, he has every opportunity. He's been in that offense long enough. Ryan Day, Kevin Wilson, Mike Yurcich is still, he's early on in that, but they know what they could do, what he would do well, how he might be able to help them if he gets on the field. I mean,
I didn't say he was Trey Lawrence or anything.
No, but in that respect, he's going to be slightly ahead of Gunnar Hoke going into camp. You'll see that'll have to play out. The more interesting competition, whether Ryan Day says that the starting job is open for grabs or not, we know what's going to transpire there. I think it is interesting to see if Gunnar Hoke gets up to speed quickly with the playbook, what his arm talent actually looks like, if they can find ways to get him to where he can be the backup. The assumption obviously was that he would come in to be that guy, but I mean, Chug has been there longer. That maybe he's a guy who does wind up being important in this.
I just think it's as intriguing to me as the summer of 2015.
Yeah.
When you had supposedly, Braxton was going to come back and try to play quarterback, but found out later there was a big experiment going on almost immediately, and you had that competition for quarterback, but you really didn't. No. One guy was the guy, and it was J.T. Barrett, or not J.T. Barrett, Cardale Jones. And in their minds, and then Cardale, spit the bit for one of another term, and J.T., they go back to J.T., and was a record-setting quarterback at Ohio State. But this is intriguing because that sets the tone. What happens at that position sets the tone for everything else you do on offense. And you and I talked about this last time I was on a podcast with you, that Ryan Day was not anointing him. The last time we talked with Ryan Day was not anointing Justin Fields as the guy yet. But you're kind of like scratching your head, well, wow, if that's not the case – it could be a really intriguing August.
I've had so many people ask that, like, why is Ryan Day doing this? And I can see both sides of the argument that you want Justin Fields, who's never taken a snap for Ohio State, to go into training camp believing that he still has something to prove. Now, in his mind, does he? Or does he, that's where this gets into this gray area, because Justin Fields certainly expects to be the starter. Everyone who covers Ohio State expects him to be the starter. Deep down, if you gave truth serum to Ryan Day, he would say that they're building their offense around what Justin Fields can do. But I sort of understand the coach speak in this respect that, you want him to go out and actually earn it. Then you can make a big deal out of it a week into camp, 2 weeks into camp, whatever. Justin's earned it. We know that he's the guy. And then you don't have any of that sort of complacency. And that's not to say that he would be. I mean, the guy obviously wants to win a national championship. He wants to be a high draft pick. It's not like he's coasting through summer workouts, but I think I guess the flip side is what I was getting to is, like, fans, or does it matter to teammates if you say, hey, go into summer workouts, throwing sessions, this is the starter, like, get behind him, and here's who you need to look to. Does that make a big difference? I don't know. It just.
Yeah, well, that's the thing you miss. I think if you don't anoint a guy, and at least behind the scenes, is you've got to have somebody in those summer 7-on-7 sessions and things who everybody knows is the guy.
Right.
They're going to rally around him. I think because you lose like a month and a half, 2 months of like just pure team building in that regard. So, I think anybody can see that Justin Fields is going to be the guy, barring calamity. And but Gunnar Hoke is a quality type backup player at this point. We'll see where it goes from there. But he clearly wanted to, could not see the light at the end of the tunnel at Kentucky, and decided, hey, give it a shot at the place I always wanted to go in the first place. Why not? They definitely could use me. And he's a big dude, and I think he throws the ball. Well, etc. But that's clearly the number one spot we're all going to be watching when we, in those cluster moments when we get to watch a few practices, maybe a few more practices in the new day,
hopefully,
the new day
era
of football than we got to watch over the last 7 years.
Was you touched on 2015 and the circus that surrounded that, and I think it exceeds what we've seen over the last 12, 13 months with Ohio State comings and goings with the quarterback situation. Is 15 the craziest sort of quarterback situation you've covered, or what compares to it?
Yeah, I mean that was right there. I mean, there were years back in the day when you went into preseason camp not knowing who that quarterback was going to be. I mean, like with Austin Mockerman and Steve Bellisari, and then Steve Bellisari has that great night against, I think it was UCLA, and suddenly he's anointed the guy. But I think they always had second thoughts about it because Austin Mockerman might have been more the better stand in the pocket, deliver the ball kind of guy. That's before you were born, I think. I can't even remember what year that was, 1999 or 2000, whenever it was. But Troy Smith, Justin Zwick back in 2000 and what was that, 2005. Like I've said many times, Troy Smith threw that what I call that Hollywood movie kind of pass, and everybody thought he was going to be the guy, but of course he had ended 2004 being suspended, for a situation, and Justin Zwick had played, and Justin Zwick was a guy, and I thought Justin Zwick had some game, but Troy took it to another level, and so they kind of mully-gullied around there until the Texas game. And the Texas game, of course, Vince Young leads Texas on that big comeback at the end, that drive to the victory. And after that, it was pretty much Troy Smith's team. And of course, we all remember the Terrell Pryor stuff.
Yeah.
And Terrell finally replaces Todd Beckman and replaces him against Troy. Which is after the debacle at the Coliseum against USC when it wasn't really Todd Beckman. It was the fact they couldn't block me or you. I mean, that was. I thought Todd Beckman was going to get killed, actually, if he'd remained the starting quarterback. Terrell Pryor was able to run around and get away from some stuff, and that ended up being a pretty good team at the end of the year. But, every year there's something different. I mean, the interesting thing about this is you not only have a brand-new quarterback, but you've got – I'm not going to call it all brand new receivers, but Austin Mack's coming back. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Austin Mack missed the whole last half of last year. He's sort of like your ringleader in that group, But Garrett Wilson, there's a good chance. I mean, they're probably not going to declare it. He probably won't start, but Garrett Wilson should be a starter by the middle of the year,
right,
just based on what you've seen. I mean, some guys just have it, right out of the gate. But, what are they going to do with, like, Jalen Gill, at hybrid back, and all these other with KJ Hill coming back, and there are all these kind of little question marks. It's not just the quarterback; they're kind of like new faces, new players who have to step up at vital positions, and that's as big a deal probably as the quarterback.
I mean, Chris Olave, it's still only 3 or 4 games where he took the next step, and
but man,
broke out.
Big time when he's on the beam. I mean, that's. You can start naming receivers and forget guys. That's what we found.
We were hearing, about Olave turning heads in August, and that, Brian Hartline had something kind of potentially special.
Yeah.
And then he didn't factor in those first few games when Ryan Day was out there. Didn't factor in much in the middle of the season. And it was like, well, I mean, why were we hearing so much about it?
Think about this.
Exploding here.
I've thought about that a lot. And the thing that was the real surprise last year more than anything else were the 3 amigos, or as I called them, the 3 graduados, because they had already graduated. But, who saw that coming from all 3 of those guys?
No.
And, Terry McLaurin was a draft pick, Was Terry McLaurin he was maybe at the end of because of a special teams performance, he might have been at the end of the year, at the end of the draft. But, you saw, Paris Campbell. We literally, it was like a cha-ching. The S went from a
dollar sign.
Yeah, the S turned into a dollar sign by the end of the year, and he's only getting better, you know. And then Johnny Dixon, you always knew how good he could be if he could stay, if his knees wouldn't betray him. But I think that kind of. And then when Austin Mack got hurt, I think that put everybody else sort of on that second burner.
Sure.
And it's kind of hard to get everybody in there, KJ Hill. KJ Hill was a leading receiver the year before. It's like it was just a ridiculous amount of numbers there that I think now they're just looking for people to step up in preseason. KJ Hill, they totally expect to be one of the key guys, the hybrid back, particularly the way they use him. He's more of a slot guy than anything else. But, Garrett Wilson has a great chance to step up, and then, like I said, Austin Mack, he should be a ringleader because he was going to be a ringleader last year till he got hurt.
That brings us back to, I think, that Heartline impact that when we were in Chicago at this time a year ago, so, well, is he going to recruit? How can he translate? He obviously had an NFL career. Is he going to be able to be a good teacher, instructor? I love watching Brian Hartline coach, like when we got to do it this spring, because he's still running routes, very hands-on. Like and running with the speed of an NFL wide receiver because he's still that young. I think that's helping him with the recruits. Julian Fleming, G. Scott, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, Mookie Cooper, just the role that he's been on. I think people are lining up to play for him, and the guys that he does have are already talented.
That's like a Seinfeld episode, a guy named Mookie.
Mookie, yeah.
Mookie Wilson, Mookie Cooper. I mean, but they're those guys are all different. I mean, when you look at them physically, Julian Fleming, he's a different dude than Mookie Cooper.
Yeah.
And then Jackson Smith from Rockwall, Texas, put on his video, and that's big time football down there, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, they've got one of those Friday Night Lights stadiums, Rockwall, which is like just northeast of Dallas, so right there on that lake. But that guy, and he put on a show, I guess, at the opening. So those are the guys that are coming, because they see what's happened to this offense over the last 2 years, and is he going to be the same as it was last year? Do I think Justin Fields is as superior a passer as Dwayne Haskins Jr.? No, I do not, based on what I've seen so far. But I think he is more than adequate. And then you add in the feet of Justin Fields, which is going to be the big difference in what you see in this offense with him on the field compared to a year ago. But this has become, clearly, it's not just Brian Hartline, but Brian Hartline's part of it. It's become clearly a wide receiver destination.
Right.
And, man, that's intriguing.
It's definitely a little different than what you've covered throughout your career, where we even heard Urban Meyer say this a lot. Like, the Cadillac position was the tailback, and we keep talking about this offense. We almost never talk about J.K. Dobbins anymore. Very weird that he's the only guy, I believe, to have 2 1,000-yard seasons at the start of his career, freshman and sophomore. He's going to be, I think, a huge part of trying to ease Justin Fields into game reps.
Well, it's interesting because Ohio State's one of those few. Well, I still call Ohio State a spread team. I mean, clearly they are.
Yeah.
They're one of the few spread teams that still leans heavily on a running back. I mean, I'm talking about that's one of their modus operandi. It's not just a joke, like at Washington State.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, everybody is intrigued in what's going to happen with J.K. Dobbins. We'll get into this as preseason camp ensues, but like he got into that syndrome, which happens when you have competition sometimes from guys being bestest buddies,
yeah,
to now, hey, when I get in there, I've got to hit a home run or Mike Weber's going to get all the carries,
coming out of the game.
And that's inevitable that those kind of situations would develop like that. That's why it's good when you have two like that one of them goes, and leaves the other guy, or they both go at once, like what happened to Georgia last year.
Well, I think they thought that was going to happen with Mike Weber last year, that they would have J.K. be that guy for 2 years, and then
but I mean, J.K. has all the earmarks of being a great running back in this offense that Ohio State runs, because they can create some space, and if those receivers come on, like I said, and now what are you going to do with Jeremy Ruckert? I mean, there's they have all kinds of potential now and I'm talking about a 4 and 5 star type talent that they didn't have even 4 or 5 years ago. I think you could see a part of the expression, we keep using it, a new day in Ohio State football now. Last year may have just sort of scratched the surface of where they can go. I mean, with Yurcich now involved in some of the play scheming, and Kevin Wilson, who I've talked about a million times, being one of the great schemers out there, this could be a very interesting season if they can get that deep into the playbook with a brand new starting quarterback and basically a brand new starting offensive line.
It's interesting how much we've talked about the offense and not even scratch the surface, as you said, on defense there.
Well, you just got to figure the defense, if it's 10% better
than the worst in school history, that'd be a pretty nice improvement.
Yeah, that'd be a big improvement.
I'm curious how, if Ryan Day will weigh in more on the defense than his predecessor did, because you'd go to these media events and press conferences with Urban, and if you had something you wanted to find out about the defense, well, that wasn't going to happen. And that's fine. We had 7 years to adjust and understand.
I think Urban knew more than he told us,
Oh, for sure.
but without a doubt. But he did leave it. You'll have to ask Luke. And 3 weeks later, when we finally get to talk to Luke,
once or twice, you and I would be in that situation in our spot in the front left of the media room. Like, oh, well, can you bring Luke in?
Can you bring Luke in? Yeah, he always met you with that stare,
Jerry will handle that.
Jerry will handle that 3 weeks from now. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's what you're hearing. They've simplified some things. They want to get athletes. Like on offense, you want to get athletes in space to make plays.
Right.
You don't want to handcuff defensive players, especially on the backside. Let them flow to the ball. Let them make some plays. Obviously everything. You always have to have responsibilities, gap responsibilities, etc. But I think they want them more freewheeling, more basic. Because the idea is the better the athlete, the less scheme you have to have anyway. Mm-hmm. And you look across the board, they've got some pretty good players that are coming back. We're going to talk about that later in one of these podcasts. But, I just think the Greg Madison hire has been intriguing to me. I keep using that word because there's a lot of intriguing stuff about this team. But, it's on the one hand, I think this guy's background speaks for itself. On the other hand, he was one of the defensive coaches on a defense that gave up 62 to Ohio State a year ago, along with Al Washington.
And it's not like you need to remind Ohio State fans of that. No. I think there's some, intrigue is the right word for that.
But I tell you, back to the offense, though, like you're saying, I think Ryan Day addressed this with us a couple times. As a head coach, you got to stand back. You got to let Mike Yurcich and Kevin Wilson do their thing on the offensive side. I mean, and he's going to be in probably a lot of most of the offensive meetings, I would think, because he's known as being a pretty good innovator himself. But this affords him. He's got two proven, pretty good offensive minds sitting there running the offense, and I think that has to make him feel pretty good. If anything, he'll probably become an arbitrator more than he will be an innovator at this point, because he understands that a head coach is about a hell of a lot more than X's and O's, and he's going to find out. For example, this week when he has to do about 4,000 interviews in a span of 2 days.
I think everyone is going to hear that.
You want to hear a funny thing? So we're sitting there one day. This is after Penn State got in the league, and this media day. Can't remember. I think it was at the Marriott, but remember it was the Marriott used to have these pins. You'd get everywhere. Everybody liked them.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and when I go into the Penn State room, and Joe Paterno's sitting there, and in his fist he had it looked like at least 20 of those pins. And he looks at us and he goes, "Have you guys tried these pins? These are great pins." And he was taking free pins back with him to Penn State to do his letter work with. I mean, that just, that's a funny, you had to be there kind of moment, but it was like, this guy could afford to buy a big pen probably.
Yeah.
And instead he's taking his free pens home with him. But you never know what you're going to run into these days, man, at the media days. It's not quite as quaint or as whatever you want to call it as it used to be. I mean, where you could sit down and be like maybe 12 or 15 of you around a table talking to, Bo Schembechler or back then Earl Bruce or, and then on down the line, Hayden Fry. I mean, Hayden Fry was one of the more entertaining dudes. Still, till this day, I still use Hayden Fry-isms. You got tea kettled, my famous line about when somebody decides not to do something. Hayden Fry's big line one day after a game when a guy blew a coverage and gave up a touchdown to Ohio State was they announced in the post-game press conference that guy wasn't coming in for interviews, and Hayden Fry said, "What a surprise." But I mean, there was like that, continual, him with his white patent leather shoes on, and it's a different era now where you get the coaches for 15 minutes and then you get them for what?
An hour,
and that's it. And in the hour, like I said, when it's Urban Meyer, now it's Ryan Day, he's going to have a huge throng. You're going to have a ridiculous circle around Jim Harbaugh, because let's face it, they can say whatever they want to up north, as the old saying goes. This is a critical year for that football team.
Without a doubt.
They haven't won a championship. And
he gets combative, even in July in Chicago, and he's going to be facing some more pointed questions than even a year ago, where it got kind of testy.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that goes over kind of well when you're new, and then you have some success early. You don't quite – get the brass ring, but you get sort of the the leadened ring.
Yeah.
A couple of years, but now it's like people want answers, and we'll see how that goes. I mean,
that guy doesn't like to give them.
He's an interesting guy in all kinds of ways. I mean, like I said, I've always liked him, but now just flippant stuff or just blowing off a question is not going to go over as well as it did, because now people are kind of emboldened to say, well, wait a minute.
Has Media Days always been in Chicago throughout your career?
Yeah.
Okay.
Different hotels, I mean, the Marriott when it first started, the Hyatt. Well, actually, it was at the Hyatt Regency the first year. Great story there. You're sitting there at the Lou Holtz was the head coach at Minnesota then, and Lou Holtz gets up at the actual kickoff luncheon, which is pretty cool. There's like 2,000 or 3,000 people sitting there, and I mean those are pretty nice. And he starts telling this story, and he goes, "I had a dream last night." He had kind of another Southern accent. He goes, "I had a dream last night." He had a little bit of a lisp, not a little bit, a lot of a lisp,
a little bit. Yeah,
I had a dream last night that they decided this year for the first time they weren't going to decide who goes to the Rose Bowl based on wins and losses. And I'm thinking, hallelujah, I'm in Minnesota, I'm rebuilding. What they decided was they were going to put a bass in the fountain there, in the fountain of the lobby of this Hyatt Regency on Wacker Drive there. It's got a big fountain in the middle. He goes, and the coaches, they were going to give the coaches a chance to catch that bass. And whoever caught that bass was going to go to the Rose Bowl. And he goes, we lined up in order the way we finished. So Bo Schembechler goes first, And so he goes through this whole thing about Bo Schembechler threw a hook with a worm on it, and the bass swam up to it and swam away, And then Earl Bruce gets up there with a bow and arrow and shoots the bow and arrow at the thing, and he misses, and then right on down the line, until finally came to me, Lou Holtz, head coach, Minnesota. So I knelt down by that fountain, and I reached in my back pocket, and I took out a teaspoon. And I took that teaspoon, and I dipped into that water, and I threw the water out, and I dipped into that water, and I threw the water out. And I did that about a few times, and this little lady comes up. She goes, Lou Holtz, what do you think you're doing? And I said, without even stopping, I said, ma'am, I'm going to the Rose Bowl. That was pretty good. There's not really a Lou Holtz in this group of head coaches.
There is not.
Not even close.
You get this group. I'm trying to even think who would be the most entertaining. Well, I like talking to Pat Fitzgerald a lot.
I think Pat Fitzgerald is always a stick of dynamite that has started to explode but hadn't gone all the way. I like him a lot. I like Chris from Wisconsin, just talking football and stuff. Row the boat in Minnesota is a great guy to talk to. Kirk Ferentz,
I get worn out doing PJ Fleck.
Yeah. Kirk Ferentz is Kirk Ferentz knows more football probably than anybody in the room, and those days when he was an assistant coach in the NFL and things like that.
Yep.
And Scott Frost to me is intriguing. He and Jeff Brom, and Ryan Day. I really like talking to Ryan Day. I mean, we were at that coaches clinic back in, when was that, April?
Yeah, right before the spring game.
And he's doing a chalk dry erase board about stuff, and I sat down, and I think you were there, and I finally, there were a few, all these high school coaches, and I held up my hand and said, "Can I ask a question?" And I asked him about 5 or 6 questions about football, because
the other thing I remember about that, Tim, is that he came out, they were ready to wrap it up. They have wings and beer for the coaches, and Tim Hinton brought him out a glass of beer. And he just kept on talking. He's drinking a beer, talking to coaches, talking to you, answering questions.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, not in a million years would I think that Urban Meyer would. And he did great with these coaches' clinics. The coaches in Ohio loved him, and he helped bring some of the prestige maybe to that event back. But Ryan Day goes beyond the time that he was allotted. And he's sitting there hot, drinking a beer, and nobody wanted to leave, and he just kept answering questions about the offense.
Right. Well, that's the thing. If you remember at his introductory press conference being named the head coach, almost the first thing out of his mouth was about starting recruiting in Ohio. I mean, getting Ohio, controlling Ohio. Not that Urban Meyer didn't want to control Ohio, but I mean, Ryan Day made a point. And now, is that because he's observed, He's observed over the last 2 years that maybe they needed to do a better job in Ohio about making whatever. But that was the first little inkling that things are going to be different under Ryan Day. And I think, but you're exactly right. I mean, we'll see if he's still sitting there having a beer with the guys 10 years from now.
And he probably won't be. But, I mean, we've seen that happen with every
But you're right.
coach.
I mean, but think about Urban Meyer when his first press conference. I mean, you had to understand. Were you here then? I'm trying to remember.
I got here in April of 12, so not for the first press conference.
This guy, the equivalent, what you want to call it phrase was like a rock star. I mean, this was rock stars you don't get to shoot the bull with.
No.
They come in, they do their act, and they go off, stage. You might have a VIP pass. Yeah. They might wave at you as they're getting in the limo. Yep. Elvis has left the building. Type thing, Urban has left the press conference.
Right.
That's what Jerry should have done. Occasionally we'd grab him, on the side. But Ryan Day said, but these guys are all different. I mean, Jim Trussell was different from John Cooper, was different from Earl Bruce in covering these guys. Luke Fickell. I enjoyed the year Luke Fickell was the head coach because I had some great conversations with that guy, and he knew what was up. He knew he was under the gun, etc. The way he handled that whole mess was, I think, admirable, especially the fact he only got to hire one coach, which was Mike Vrabel, his best buddy.
Yep.
But he's coming in. He's going to be coming in loaded for bear. The people that think this Ohio State preseason, and we'll get into that in later podcasts.
Yeah, week 2 is going to be an interesting week of discussion.
I mean, even Florida Atlantic, they're one of those teams that benefits from the transfer portal, and they've
been busy.
They're sort of like a different team compared to the team you saw at the end of the year last year.
Right.
So, we'll be getting into all that stuff. I think this is where we come to the end of a podcast because, but I'm really looking forward to this association and having some fun with you guys.
As are we. We're going to put this. This will be available on all the normal podcast services, whatever you may use. We're going to have a bright new logo. This logo is actually going to be updated as well as we kind of revamp and rebuild here for year 2. Tim, we're excited to have him be part of that for us as we try and keep growing this to the place to come hang out and get all your Ohio State news and coverage and analysis with the players and the professional, as our boss says, the professional journalism from me and Tim. You can use that at your own discretion.
Sure.
But this is awesome. It's going to be the Tim May podcast. I won't always be on here with him unless he wants me to be. We'll see. We're working out those details, but he's here hanging out, and we're thrilled. Couldn't be more thrilled to have him. So
anybody with a limp needs a crutch, man.
Hey, if I can just come out here, I'll be your caddy. I'll just tee up the golf ball.
There you go.
I'll just let you crush
better
it.
stand way back. Not stand back, but stand way back. Hey, really enjoyed it, Austin. As you know, you and I have gotten along well for quite a while now, and I'm really looking forward to our association.
Can't wait, man. Let's do it all year. We'll be in Chicago this week. We'll do some Lettermen Live. We'll talk about Big Ten football from Chicago. We'll still have Spencer behind the camera for us. So, again, excited. For Tim, I'm Austin Ward, and we're going to see you later on Chicago this week.